As Iowans, we are resilient. We are determined. We are committed. And we are strong. As Iowans, our strength grows when we empower one another. Iowa State University Extension and Outreach delivers education and information based in research for your reality. Because when you are strong, we all are strong. Here for you, now, always.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Tips from an Expert. My name is LEAH FELTZ. I'm a social media specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and I'm excited to be here with you today. It has been a minute since our last Tips from an Expert, and I'm excited actually to bring you back two of, I'll just say our favorite, they can't deny it, two of our favorite specialists that are joining us today. It is September 1st, which begins a Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. So we know that this is an important month to talk about mental health, to take a check-in on all of us, and to ensure you have resources that you might need or that someone around you might need. So let's bring Andrea on, reintroduce yourself. It's been since May, since the last time you joined us. Hey.
Hasn't been that, it doesn't feel like that long ago. But,
I know.
Yeah, summer does that, right?
Right.
My name is Andrea Gustafson. I am working with the COVID Recovery Iowa grant through Iowa State as part of that as a crisis and outreach counselor. And then I also work in private practice as a mental health therapist. So that's, I guess, what qualifies me to be an expert.
Absolutely, for sure. The most expert of experts. And Andrea will be joining me on our Instagram page, our Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Instagram page, 5 times this month on Thursday evenings
Yes.
at 8 p.m. And we're going to be breaking down some topics. We'll talk about most of them today, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth on Instagram. Again, Thursdays in September at 8 p.m. We have another guest with us today. She's an extension specialist. This is Demi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I like to piggyback off of Andrea's professionalism and expertism. I am our behavioral health program specialist, and so I'm really kind of the coordinator behind many of the mental health programs that Iowa State University Extension and Outreach is offering this year.
Yes, so we have an incredible team of staff that are working on ensuring that there are programs and resources available through Extension. And one thing, when I was new to the Extension family, the thing that kind of blew my mind was how everything we have, because we have kind of everything on everything. Like it's actually incredible. And it's all research based. It's all trusted resources, trusted information, and then trusted staff that support that. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of those resources today. Andrea, you're going to kind of lead the charge. You're going to kind of do a bit of a mental health check-in, and then also just give us an overview of some things like what to expect from therapy, finding a therapist, some things like that. Again, these might be things that you, the viewer, need, or you might be aware of someone around you that could benefit from some of this information. So I'm going to hand it on over to you. Reminder, those of you watching, whether you're watching now live or later when it's recorded, add your comments, questions, things that have worked for you, things you've seen work for others. Add those to the comment section. We love to interact and see where you guys are at.
Okay. So as we were talking about, coming into Suicide Prevention Month and just the mental health of all of us, I mean, we are now 18 months into this pandemic and things have gone up and down and all over the place. And, there has been some conversation about mental health, which is important, making sure you're doing sort of some mental health check-ins with yourself. Are you, even on a day-to-day basis, like when was the last time you had some water? When was the last time you got up and walked away from your desk for a few minutes? Are you getting enough sleep at night? When was the last time you ate something? Just kind of taking that time to check in with yourself and see how you're doing, how you're feeling. Things are just very constantly changing with the pandemic and constantly changing in life. We're transitioning from summer into fall, which, start of school can bring its own stresses and feelings. So, if you haven't done that lately, maybe take a couple of minutes here to just say, how am I doing? Am I doing those basic things to take care of myself? How am I feeling? Am I feeling okay? Am I feeling kind of depressed? Am I sort of lacking energy? Am I feeling anxious? Just how are you doing in general? I think a lot of times we get very busy during our day and we forget to check in with ourselves. We may check in with friends or family or coworkers and ask how they're doing, but we kind of forget to do that for ourselves. And we talk a lot about, or at least I talk a lot about it. It's my profession that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to reach out to a therapist if that's something that you do. But I had this realization when I was planning some of this stuff with Leah that we don't ever really talk about, it's okay to get a therapist, but nobody really talks about like the practical steps involved of like, how do I find a therapist? When, is there sort of a general benchmark at which maybe it's time to find a therapist? So I thought we could go through some of that today and hopefully make what I know can be an intimidating process a little bit less scary. So a question I get a lot, whether it's, doing a live, whether it's with, friends, family, people I encounter at Target because I can't get through the checkout at Target without somebody telling me their life story, is when do I know? How do I know if I need to see a therapist? And my very generic and not super helpful answer is whenever you want. There is no right or wrong time to ask for help. If seeing a therapist is something you feel like you could benefit from, you absolutely move forward and do that. A little bit more of a practical answer, if you're asking that question of yourself or if you have people in your life you're concerned about, is generally speaking, if someone's having symptoms that last for 2 weeks or longer, that's probably a good time to think about reaching out to a professional for more help. If you're, having insomnia and you don't normally have insomnia and that's lasting 2 weeks, if you're feeling kind of depressed or you're struggling with anxiety, or just generally feel like you're not doing very well mentally and emotionally for that kind of 2-week mark, that's usually a good indication that this may be something more than what you are equipped to deal with on your own, which does not make you a good or bad person. It just means we all have a limit and that you have reached yours. So that's kind of a good marker as to when to ask for that help. So then the next question I get a lot is, okay, so I've decided I'm going to, try and find a therapist. Where do I even start to look for a therapist? How do I find that person? There are lots of places to find a therapist. A Google search will get you a lot of therapists to start with, but that can be very overwhelming. So the one place I refer a lot of people to is psychologytoday.com. They are a magazine publication for those of us that work in the field, but they also have a directory of therapists all over the country. So you can search by your town, by your zip code, and it'll bring up the therapist in your area. And it also provides a lot of information about those therapists. If like I'm on that directory, and so there's space for me to write about myself, write about how I do therapy, what kind of how I approach therapy. So you can kind of get a sense of us as people. But it also provides information about what insurance plans I accept, how to get a hold of me, what the average cost per session is if you don't have insurance. There's just a wealth of information, and it kind of gives you a jumping point, a starting point to look for a therapist that might be a good fit for you. The yourlifeiowa.org also has a directory. My understanding, and Demi, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, is that that's more of a directory, so it'll list the people in your area. I don't know that it necessarily has as much information about each individual therapist, but if that's an option as well, if you just need someone in your area, and you can search by county within Iowa. So those are two great places to start. There's also, your physician can be a great place to get referrals from. 211 is a great place to get referrals from. I believe even Iowa Concern has access to like the directories for the entire state. So there's lots of places to get started. There's lots of places to try and find that person. And then it's, from there, a phone call or an email, and hopefully they get back to you and get you scheduled relatively quickly. Within that sort of, how do I find somebody? There's always a question about affordability, which unfortunately is an issue for some people. All medical plans these days cover mental health services in some capacity. There was a law passed several years ago requiring insurance companies to cover mental health in a similar fashion to the way they cover medical things. So your insurance usually has coverage. The question is, if you have a high deductible plan, obviously you're paying those expenses till that deductible is met, or there's just varying degrees of what your insurance covers. The therapist you connect with can help you figure some of that out. You can also call your insurance directly and get some of that information. Other options, if you don't have insurance, or for a fact that you have a high deductible plan and you're like, I can't pay out of pocket every week for services, is ask the provider that you're reaching out to if they offer any kind of financial assistance or sliding fee scale. Most of us, I can't speak for all of us, yes, this is what we do for a living, and yes, we need to make a living at doing it, but most of us will offer some sort of something. Agencies can sometimes do the sliding fee scale. Most private practitioners can't, for a wide variety of reasons, but we offer other alternatives. I knew a therapist at one time that she, if somebody needed financial assistance, they talked through what that looked like, and then they got a discount on therapy. But to sort of make up the difference, she asked that they do some volunteering at a place of their choice, but contribute some hours volunteering to kind of make up that cost. So there's also a website called the Open Pathways Collective. I think that's a .com address. I had it written down somewhere, but do I have that note here? Sure don't. But Open Paths is a a collective of therapists who have agreed to take a certain number of clients at a discounted rate. Oh, I see Demi just popped it up. It's .org, openpathscollective.org. So they have agreed to offer a discounted rate to a certain number of clients per month or whatever. So there is a small fee for you to become a member of the Open Paths Collective, but then from there you have access to a bunch of therapists who are willing to offer discounted rates for services if affordability is an issue. So, I understand that affordability is a consideration. I absolutely understand that. I always hope that is not the reason somebody doesn't get the help that they need or want. And I encourage you to just ask if you're in that situation. You might be surprised at the willingness of us in this field to work with people to get them the help that they need, even if they can't pay the full rate or don't have insurance or something like that. It's also important to, when you're searching for a therapist, like you want to be comfortable with that person. You're going to be talking about a lot of big things, important things, and you want to be comfortable with that person. You're not going to have a good experience in therapy if your therapist makes you anxious, if you don't feel comfortable going. Like that's all going to interfere. So, take some time, find out about them. That's why I really like Psychology Today. It offers us an opportunity to sort of advertise ourselves and how we approach things, because I'm not, I tell my clients all the time, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm fairly relaxed in how I do things. I don't have a plan every time we come into session. And some people want that. Some people want a more rigid, like, this is our plan, this is what we're doing. So knowing what you want and finding that in a therapist is important. And along with that, ask that therapist questions. Like if you decide to schedule with them, which we're going to talk about what to expect in the first session in a little bit. But if you schedule an appointment with them, ask them questions or email them and ask them questions before you decide to schedule. They're probably for good reason not going to give you their home address. So don't ask questions like that. But, if you have questions about how they do therapy, their qualifications, their background, if there's a specific issue you're wanting to see somebody about, do they have experience in working with that? Are they comfortable working with that type of issue or population? Really, I tell people that questions, I can't promise you that every therapist is going to answer every question. So ask your questions. And if they don't feel comfortable answering, they'll tell you that. But, sometimes I have clients who just ask me questions like, do you have any animals? What's your favorite color? Like, what's your favorite kind of movie? Like they want a little bit of that, like, she's a human. What are her interests outside of work? And I personally don't have an issue answering those questions because curiosity, right? Like I'm curious about humans. That's why I do this job. I want to know everything about everybody. So it seems only fair that people get to know a little bit about me. So, really kind of, for lack of a better term, interview your therapist and make sure they're going to be a good fit. And I think the most important thing is if you go to a first session with somebody, with a therapist, and you're like, I thought this was going to be a good fit, it's not really working out. Okay, don't feel like you have to go back. It's okay to try more than one therapist. In fact, if you tell the therapist that you saw, like, hey, I just don't feel like this is a good fit, they will more than likely help you find somebody else who maybe would be a better fit or would have some of those things that maybe you're looking for. It is not offensive to us as therapists if you tell us, hey, this just isn't a good fit for me. Okay, I want it to be a good fit for you. So don't be afraid if you try one to be like, this wasn't a good fit, I'm going to try again. I know that's hard when you're already struggling to be like, oh, I reached out for help and it didn't work out. And so now I have to do the whole process again. I get it. It's not fun. It's exhausting, but it's worth it. If you find a therapist that is a good fit for you, it'll be very worth it in the long run. So once you've done all of that and you've made the decision, I'm going to therapy, I found a therapist, I've made the appointment, I've worked out affordability, all of that. Now I'm going to that first appointment. What should I expect when I get there for that first session with a therapist? Most therapists, well, all therapists I know, but again, I can't speak for the entire population of therapists. We do what we call is a biopsychosocial history with everybody during our first session. There's not going to be a quiz. You don't need to remember that word, but that is what we do because we are getting information about biological things. Do you have any health concerns? Depending on the age of the client, we may ask about, like, did they hit their milestones, like walking, talking, all those things. Developmentally, was everything on target? Just trying to figure out if they're, or take into consideration that there could be biological factors going on. Also, we usually ask about substance abuse, not because we are judging, not because we are going to call the cops if you're using illegal substances, but because that's important. That contributes to how you're doing mentally. We just need to know the information. It's not about judging you or trying to get you in trouble or make you feel bad. It's strictly information gathering. So that's the bio part. The psycho part comes from the psychological portion of it. And we ask, how have you been doing? How have you been feeling? What symptoms are you experiencing? We may ask about family history of mental illness. Does anybody else in the family struggle with mental illness? Does anybody else in the family struggle with substance abuse? Asking about relationships that, with your family. Do you get along with your family? Are you estranged from your family? Just kind of trying to get a general picture of what life has been like for you. And then the social history. We'll cover the social history of just, do you have hobbies that you enjoy? Are you socially active? Do you have friends? Do you have a support system? Just, again, trying to get that kind of general picture of how you're doing and what you've got going on. I do tell people that I obviously can't control what my clients tell me. I just have to work with what I'm giving. And that being said, I also don't expect that my clients are being 100% completely transparent, fully honest with me in the first session, because I get it. Coming to therapy is weird. You're having a tough time, and now you're going to go talk to a stranger about all the really hard things in your life. That is, for some, can be overwhelming. That can be scary. That can be stressful. And quite frankly, if it's not, I'm probably it's almost more concerning to me if that's not stressful to you than if it is, because most of us don't go around telling strangers about everything that we've got going on in life. So you are, despite all the questions that are being asked, you are still in control of that session. You still get to decide what gets shared, what doesn't get shared, what you talk about. And that's fine. If there's, I have clients all the time that they come in for one thing and we start working on that. And as we work through that, they realize there's something else that is more relevant than they thought it was. And so then they bring it up a few sessions in, and that's okay. We just roll with it and we make it work. You are always, even in a therapy setting, you are still in control of telling your story and telling your story at your pace. So the other big thing that gets asked in that first session and is going to be talked about is asking about suicidal ideation, self-harm ideation, and if there's any other past attempts. Again, this is not to judge you. It is not to look for a reason to like send you to the hospital, or to turn something into a crisis that isn't a crisis. You know, my number one goal is that my clients feel better when they leave my office and that they are safe. So, asking about suicidal ideation. If I ask a client, have you ever had thoughts of suicide? Have you ever had thoughts of self-harm? And their answer to me is yes. My next question is, can you tell me about that? Or will you tell me about that? I personally, and most therapists that I know, we're going to do everything in our power to keep you out of the hospital. We don't want to send people to the hospital. That is not an enjoyable experience for us. That is the last thing that we want for you. We will do it if that is what's safest for you, because your safety is our number one priority, but that's not what we want. So telling us that you're having suicidal ideation or you've thought about harming yourself or anything like that is not an automatic like hospital phone call, one-way ticket to the ER. That's not how that works. We just want to understand where you're at and how you're doing, and is there an imminent risk? Can we safety plan with you and send you home safely? Or is it passing ideation that is, not really well developed or not much of a threat? Like, again, we just want to know where you're at and what's going on. And we don't want to send anybody to the hospital. That's like, we're not looking for a reason to do it. We'd prefer everybody come in and they get to go home to their own house, to their own bed where all their comfy stuff is. But again, you're in control. I would hope that you had found somebody comfortable enough to share that with if you need to. But nobody can beat it out of you either at that first session. So turns out they frown upon us putting our hands on our clients. So that's kind of what to expect in that first session. It is a lot of information gathering. It is a lot of questions from the therapist to the client. You will probably do the vast majority of the talking in that first session because I'm trying to get to know you. I'm not going to offer you advice or suggestions until I have a better idea of who you are and how you function and what you need. So that is an opportunity I personally, at the end of all of my first sessions, tell my clients, okay, now that I've fired questions at you for 45 minutes, it only seems fair that if you have questions for me, you can fire them back. So I build in that opportunity for people to ask me questions because I want them to make sure I'm a good fit for them. Not all therapists do that, but you certainly, as things are wrapping up, that's your opportunity to throw them out there if you haven't had a chance before that to ask many questions. So I feel like there's a lot of information thrown at everybody all at once. And the weird thing about these lives is that I'm staring at myself. And so I have no idea what everybody's response is. So.
I know I was like, I'm trying to get myself centered over here. We got to get on the screen with her. Because Demi and I could see us. We weren't on screen, but I could see her and and we laughed all your jokes. Okay. Demi and I laughed at all of them. So please know that and I also wrote down biopsychosocial just in case there was a quiz. I did be prepared for that. So that was very important.
Yes, you're such a good student.
I really try. Really do. So it was a lot of information, but that was so valuable, especially for someone that's maybe getting to that point themselves, realizing that this might be the next step for me. I've tried some things on my own, or maybe I have been confiding in friends or family, but I'm just needing a little more support to have the understanding of what the next step could look like. And then also to understand what that potential first meeting would be like. Demi, I know that you've got some resources for those that are maybe not needing this support for themselves, but realizing that they've got others in their life that they'd like to better support. So I'm going to let you kind of share a bit about that.
Yeah, so everything that Andrea shared was absolutely wonderful information. Whether you are looking for a therapist or other mental health professional for yourself, or if you're walking a friend or a neighbor or maybe a congregation member or someone else in your life kind of through that process and what they would expect. And Iowa State has a couple programs for that, and I kind of will come back to those in just a minute. But I did want to touch on a couple of things that Andrea shared. And so the first one is she shared 2 resources that we like to let people know about for finding a therapist. And what I really like about them is they kind of do 2 different things well. And so if you are having a conversation with someone you care about and they maybe say that they're ready to find a therapist, but they don't know how, the YourLifeIowa.org website is an excellent resource for just this broad overview of what services are available near you that might not just be like a talk therapist like what Andrea does, but it could be maybe somebody who focuses on gambling or substance use, or maybe you want like a large peer group for grief counseling. And so that might be a good resource for this really large general overview. And then once you narrow down what kind of mental health help that you or this person want, that's where that Psychology Today website comes in really handy, because that one is where you can really start to dig in to the individual characteristics and trainings and certificates of the therapist, for an example that you might see. And so that would be really similar to if you're looking for a primary care physician and you're looking for the difference between maybe an MD and a DO, or you want to know where they studied or what populations that they have taken extra continuing education credits to like really dig in and hone in on. And so knowing about those 2 resources and feeling strong about how to use them is a great way to help someone else maybe navigate that process, because it can be overwhelming. And especially depending on what their mental health symptoms are, it can be so overwhelming. Sometimes it's hard to do it alone. The other thing that we talked about a little bit was, again, the different types of therapists or mental health providers. And so Andrea spoke a lot about what is it like if you go to see a talk therapist. If that isn't something that is covered in your immediate health insurance coverage, you might start with your primary care physician and just start to address some mental health concerns with them. And that's going to look a little bit different than it would if you're going to a talk therapist, like a social worker or a counselor or a marriage and family therapist in your area. And so that's one of the things that we teach in our mental health first aid classes that Iowa State Extension and Outreach offers. And so we have 2 programs that we're really promoting right now. The first one is mental health first aid, and that one's going to give you this long kind of overview of what are some mental health challenges that are really common in the United States, and what are the different signs and symptoms of them. What are the different types of mental health professionals? If you are trying to help a friend or someone find a good fit just on a broad overview, what are the different types of treatments that are available to somebody who is experiencing a mental health challenge? And then what would I'm going to say like intervention, but it's not really an intervention. What would that conversation look like between maybe just some early signs and symptoms where you're not really sure, maybe it's just typical like adolescent development, or in a crisis where you're really, really worried about this person? And how is that approach going to be a little bit different in each of those situations? And so that's an 8-hour class, but it covers this whole huge long topic, and it allows a lot of people to walk away from that just feeling a lot more confident that they're able to then have that conversation with somebody if they need it. Okay, but we also know that 8 hours is a really long time to take out of your work day or your weekend to talk about mental health. And so we also offer Question, Persuade, Refer, which is our 1-hour suicide prevention class. And that one's just going to dig into that nitty-gritty What are the signs and symptoms of suicide? Who is at risk in your community? Because we know it's widespread, but there are also certain populations that are sometimes at a higher risk. And if you're really worried about somebody, how do you come right out and ask about suicide? And so as a part of that class, sometimes we ask people to ask the question, are you thinking about killing yourself, or are you considering suicide? Which is something a therapist would ask too, but it's also totally fine to ask that question as a friend, a neighbor, a brother, a sister, a wife, a husband, to somebody you care about. And so you don't have to know how to treat them. We don't want you to, we don't expect you to, but that's a really great way then to, as a friend or as a neighbor, as the pastor of your church, to be able to let somebody know that you notice them and that you care about them and that you're going to be along their side with them when they then go through that process, the next steps of trying to find the mental health provider that will be a good fit for them and their needs. So with those two classes, mental health first aid, we have several coming up across the state of Iowa in the next couple months. So at the end of this month, on September 28th, we're going to be teaching a youth mental health first aid class for adults who work with youth in Mason City. And then on October 12th, we'll be teaching one for adults in Osage, Iowa. And then there will additionally be one on October 27th. And then question, persuade, refer, that nice shortened one specifically about suicide. We have one coming up in Primgar, Iowa on September 13th. And then we have online ones, so you can just join us via Zoom on September 14th and October 12th. So if those are things that are of interest to you, we have a few coming up, and we're always able to schedule a few more too. Okay, just threw a ton of information out there. What questions do you have, Leah?
I think you covered all. I've got Andrea back on too. But yeah, the fact that, again, you can take trainings so that you are better equipped for the support you might need to offer those around you. And that way, if you do have someone that does share something with you, you might even have, a little bit more in your tool belt to know what to say or do. And I really love that we're keeping some virtual offerings, that I've seen that happening. A lot of organizations are keeping some of the programs are, back to being in person safely, but then virtual is still an opportunity because there's so many of us that for whatever reason have harder times getting to those in-person things. Andrea, a lot of professionals are still probably seeing mental health professionals seeing clients virtually as well. Is that yes? Am I right?
That is yes, you are. That is, I know a lot of places are still offering that. And again, there is usually some coverage through your insurance to cover telehealth as well, if that's something that's easier for you. We're finding that particularly if you live in a rural area, sometimes there's not always as many therapist options out there. Or if you're, I'm like, I grew up in a small town. I was like, I don't know that I want to see the therapist in my small town that I'm also going to see at the grocery store. Telehealth is a good way that, as long as I'm licensed for the state of Iowa. I'm located in Des Moines, but I'm licensed to practice in the state of Iowa. So as long as you live within the state of Iowa, I can take you on as a client. So through telehealth, people are able to maybe access therapists that were too far to drive before, or there just aren't options in their area. So yeah, telehealth is, the virtual stuff and the telehealth stuff, although I think some of us are getting a little tired of it from time to time, has certainly been a benefit that has come out of what we've been dealing with for the last 18 months, because it sort of shoved all of us into figuring out how to do virtual, whether we wanted to or not. And now we're finding out there are some definite benefits to being able to offer that option.
Having pajama pants on is one. You can be, professional at top, bedtime down below.
Absolutely.
Hypothetically speaking, of course.
Yeah. Leah, I'm going to need you to stand up now and do a spin for all of us.
My earbuds won't reach, so I can't. Okay, so we talked about this actually last time that we were on a live, but it was a good one, and I think we've kind of touched a bit on some trainings that'll be really helpful for this. But what if you're reaching out to a friend, realizing you've seen changes in habits, you're not sure what's going on, you want to offer some help, but they're not necessarily accepting that. What do you do?
It depends some on the age of the person we're talking about. If there's somebody who's under 18, like if there's a teen watching this or a teenager that you're concerned about, definitely contact their parents. Assuming that, sometimes the parents are the reason that the kid is having issues. And so to the best of your ability, you want to assess the safety of contacting the parents for the kid, but definitely contacting the parents. Sometimes if you know what school they go to, you can contact the guidance counselor and just say, hey, I'm concerned about this student, and the guidance counselor can sort of check in with them. If they're an adult, that gets a little bit trickier because you can't really force them to do anything. My general advice is to just continue to be a friend to the best of your ability. Continue to express your concern and tell them that you're worried, and is there anything you can do to help. They may continue to say no, and they may get frustrated with you for continuing to ask, but that's the best you can do, is to continue to put it out there and hope that eventually they will kind of get around to a place where they're ready to ask for help. I often think of, I've seen memes of this lately, but the example that often pops into my head is Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore is very clearly clinically depressed, like his character is. And despite being very clinically depressed and always kind of down in the dumps and never really enthusiastic, his friends continue to include him and ask him and check on him and be a good friend to him. And so that really is the best you can do. If you are concerned to the point where you feel like there is an imminent risk to that person, like they have said or done things that lead you to believe they might be suicidal, or they might be imminently suicidal, and there's a risk that they could do harm, you can always have their local police department do a welfare check. Some places, I know Des Moines has a mobile crisis unit, and I think other areas around the state have mobile crisis. You can call and say, hey, I'm worried. Can you send out mobile crisis to do a welfare check? The police will still go with them for safety purposes. But the mobile crisis unit is staffed by mental health professionals. So that is always an option too. If you have a friend that you're worried about, that all of a sudden you can't get a hold of them, or you haven't seen them, or you're just really concerned that maybe they are talking to you and what they're saying in their text is concerning. You can always take that route. But if they're an adult, unfortunately, we have less, fortunately, because adults, like, we don't want to be controlling people, but you have less leverage to sort of force their hand once they're an adult. So,
right.
I like to add to that.
We talked earlier. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I like to add to that too. Make sure you're taking care of yourself in those situations too. And so if you are really worried about a youth in your life or a friend in your life, and they're not getting the help that they need, and it's bothering you to the point where it's becoming a problem then for you, make sure that, again, you're talking to your own therapist or somebody to just say, help me let this go, or help me see what my capabilities are here.
And I do have I have had clients over my years in practice come in who are like, maybe they aren't the ones struggling with mental illness, but they are being affected by either a mentally ill family member or a family member who has substance use issues, or, a whole lot of things that they're like, I see this meme on Facebook a lot too. Like, I'm in therapy because my family won't go or my friend won't go. You're like, sometimes we end up in therapy because the people in our life that need to go to therapy don't go to therapy. So
I'm here because they're not.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
So it's, that's another one of those. There is no really right or wrong reason to go to therapy. There's no right or wrong time. So if you're, like Demi said, if you're really concerned about somebody and they're just not getting help or doing anything to help themselves, like, make sure you're taking care of yourself and doing what you need to do.
So I left this on, even though we were talking a little bit more, but I wanted to make sure that as many people as possible can see the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So this hotline, Andrea, do you want to share a little bit more about who could call this hotline, maybe why people would call this hotline?
Sure. So the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you call this number, somebody will answer. They do also, for the younger / more tech savvy, if you go to their website, they do have a chat function so that you can, it's a live chat, there's a person there, but you can, interact that way if you're more comfortable with that. This is a good resource for a lot of people. It's more than just for people who are maybe feeling suicidal. If you yourself are feeling suicidal, this is absolutely a number to call. And feeling suicidal is a surprisingly broad descriptor. This is not like I am on the edge, imminently going to do something to harm myself, and I need somebody to talk me off the ledge, to put the pills down, put the knife down, whatever. That is absolutely a good time to call these people. And if you ever find yourself in that situation, call them and somebody will help you. But you don't have to wait to be at that point to call and talk to them. If you are just, maybe you're in the slump of a depression and you're starting to have just sort of general thoughts of maybe it would be better off if I wasn't here, or I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. I can't live this way anymore. You can certainly call at that point too. And they can help and talk you through some things, get you connected to resources if you aren't already connected to resources. You can also call, this is another, if you have somebody you're worried about, and you aren't really sure what to do, you can call this number and say, hey, my friend, my sibling, my cousin, my whoever has been exhibiting some things that have me really concerned, and I'm just not really sure what to do about it or how to help them or how to approach them. And they will absolutely be able to talk you through that as well and kind of figure out the best approach to handle some of that. So
I think that's helpful to know, because otherwise I think I would have assumed I was only calling this if I was wanting to take, action as something that would harm myself.
Yeah.
So I think understanding that this line is for crisis surrounding suicide, but it doesn't mean that you're ready to act on it, or that somebody that you're worried about, that they're in imminent danger maybe, but that they've expressed they've had a thought. You just don't know what to do. You can go to this number.
Absolutely.
All right. So, sorry, you go, Demi.
No, I was just going to say, I also saw that you dropped the 741-741 crisis text line in the chat too. And I like to try to remind people that that's also a great one, especially if you have teenagers in your home or in your life that are significantly less likely to pick up a phone and use words to talk about it, but maybe have a more private, quiet place to just text what's going on. And again, same use, same concept. Yeah,
the ability to text or have like the online chat option just can help take one more barrier away from, the unknowns of who am I going to talk to? Who's going to be on the other line? What do I say? Those type of things. So yeah, the texting option's amazing. So that's a suicide prevention hotline, in those times of crisis. We also have resources through Extension that are numbers that you can call all day, all days, all hours. Iowa Concern is one of those. You can give Iowa Concern a call for stress that you're having in your life. That stress can be related to family, work, all of the above. They also support legal questions, or could be even needing to maybe talk to somebody that could offer some advice about something legally related, financial support, and then also some larger disaster recovery. And so finance-wise, they can help you one-on-one with budgeting and things like that, you just might need someone that knows more than you do to support you with that. Iowa Concern's a really good first stop, and they may point you to some of the other things that we have referenced already today, some of the other sources. Like Andrea mentioned earlier, she's a part of a larger group called COVID Recovery Iowa. COVID Recovery Iowa is, well, Demi, I guess maybe you should tell people about COVID Recovery Iowa. You have a much better sense of it.
Or I can if you don't want to, Demi. It's up to you.
So COVID Recovery Iowa is part of a special FEMA grant right now, and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach is one of 5 organizations across the state that are providing staff time and resources to kind of help boost the momentum of this program. And so that's how we got to be partnered with Andrea and use all of her expertise under the Iowa State Extension and Outreach umbrella. But COVID Recovery Iowa, very similar to the Iowa Concern Hotline, is a website and a hotline that's able to, again, take all those calls if somebody is experiencing financial hardship or mental health concerns, or maybe they just want a better person explanation of maybe new mandates or proclamations that are happening. That's a great resource for that. If you need to be partnered with a counselor to talk through some mental health things, you'll likely get Andrea or another one of our therapists, Diane, on that phone call, and they'll be able to walk through and provide some counseling on certain things. Andrea, do you want to add to that?
I was going to say, much better overview than I would have provided.
No, I think you did a great job, Demi. I think you hit all the important parts.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I think for both Iowa Concern and COVID Recovery Iowa is that they are free and available. Again, Iowa Concern, I love the line that they use: all days, all hours. And both services do have some language interpretation availabilities as well. So those are some great resources. All right, so I have stacked our comment section with a lot of the links that you guys have referenced. The trainings that people can go learn more about. Again, those trainings are really good for putting a little bit more in your mind and in, like I said earlier, your tool belt, so that you can better help others. And like Demi referenced, one is a longer, more day filled of learning, and then another is a bit shorter. So you can kind of figure out what works better for you. But make sure throughout this live, if we've talked about something that's, you're like, oh, I want to check that out a bit more, check the comment section. As we kind of wrap up, if you're watching this later, when the live's over, feel free to still add any questions or comments or message our page. I'll ensure that those get to Demi or Andrea and that they can provide some support for your question or comment. Thank you both again for joining us. It is September, which is still crazy that we're in a new month again. It keeps happening.
Yes, it is.
Every 30, 31 days, it seems.
Yeah.
And it is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And we want to ensure that we are really amplifying the message of the resources that are available to you guys, Iowans and beyond. So keep an eye on our page. We're going to be promoting a lot of our resources. And then again, if you'd like to join, Andrea and I will be on Instagram every Thursday night this month, breaking down some of the topics we've talked about already today, and then a couple additional ones, just spending a little more time going in depth on those topics. All right. Well, I think that ends it. Any last final words to leave? No, we're good.
Not for me. We're good.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and have a good week and a good September.